Hello and welcome. My name is Aubrey Masango and welcome to the inaugural ASI Biz-Exchange podcast. This is going to be a journey that I think is going to be very, very pivotal and quite revolutionary for the South African business community. With me this evening is Tishalan Pillay. He's Group Director, Sales, Marketing and Distribution at ASI Group, together with Anthony Govender, Founder and CEO at ASI Group. We're going to be talking today about what I think is a solutions conversation based on an idea that the ASI Group is bringing into the South African business space. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about it as, I suppose, the evolution of South Africa's business space continues to grow. But you're going to be hearing the acronym ETA a lot. But it stands for Entrepreneurship-Through-Acquisition funding, or sometimes called search funding. And both these gentlemen are going to be talking to me about that today. Let me start off with Tish, because I think you're the technical guy behind all of this. And then, of course, we'll bring the old geezer here, Anthony, into the conversation as we continue. What is ETA, and what is ETA funding specifically, Tish?
Of course. So ETA, or Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, is a game changer, in my opinion. I've had the privilege of working in many international markets like UK, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa specifically. So not just South Africa, but the rest of the continent. And I've seen the challenges and opportunities all over the world firsthand. And when I came across ETA and search funding, what really struck out for me is that this is a business model that now offers a third pathway to business people, whether it's graduates coming out of university or even experienced professionals already in the workforce. It offers a third career path or way forward in terms of doing business. It started off in the USA at Stanford University in the 1980s. It's been sort of quiet and under the radar since then. I don't think the conditions globally have been conducive to a model like this working universally. But what started off as an idea, fast forward now to 2025, or even in the last couple of years, it's really started to gain traction in the UK market, as well as Europe and in Spain particularly. And it's now sort of coming to the surface and looking like quite an attractive solution to the problems we face here in South Africa and on the African continent. So to give you an idea of why it's become attractive abroad, is in these countries, USA, UK, and Europe, they have an aging population. So the average age of a person in Europe is 45 years old. So what you can understand from that is that most of the population is 45 years and above. And that's the bulk of the population in that country. So we're facing now a succession gap globally, where retiring founders or retiring business people are looking to have a succession plan in place and protect their legacy. So the ETA model, which is basically a young entrepreneur or searcher, as it's called, is basically empowered to take over a business from a successor, and is funded by private equity. And that allows the retiring founder to have a succession plan in place, but also allows for a new career path for a young business professional. So you can see why that model is attractive in an aging population. But bringing it back to Africa, we have the same succession gap here. We also have a huge youth unemployment crisis we face. But on the flip side of that, the opportunity is that we also have the youngest population on the planet. So the average age in Africa is actually 20 years old, 19.3 years old to be exact, which is, much younger than the average age of 45 abroad. So while we have the challenge that fits the bill for ETA and search funding, we also have an equally large opportunity to capitalize on the same.
Anthony Govender, I want to bring you into this part of the conversation and say, it's a great opportunity conceptually. I think that what Tish has explained now is unassailable as an opportunity conceptually. You're an entrepreneur. You're in the thick of things, as it were. How does this concept make sense practically in the South African context for you?
Yeah, Aubrey, I think there are three sort of major opportunities. Let me say that it's not just a proof of concept. So what started as a proof of concept, for us going back to about 2017, 2018, we did 2 transactions in the Eastern Cape. We took the proof of concept to market. We tried and tested it. Fantastic returns on that business and a great success story. We then replicated that several times over in 3 composites, the 3 composite businesses that we have being financial services, property, and connectivity, what you would traditionally know as ICT. And having done, just in the last 5 years, we've done over 14 transactions in the last 5 years, and all of them highly successful, with great success stories between founder entrepreneurs now going through the transition phase and partnering in the process. So it's not just proof of concept. I think there are 3 major opportunities for us in South Africa in the current context. If you look at the average business owner, typically a baby boomer older than 50, and a lot of them white business owners. Without racializing the context of this, we live in a very particular set of circumstances in South Africa, in a very particular context. But you have business owners older than the age of 50, and you've got this massive unemployment in our country. And as Tish pointed out earlier, that Africa has the youngest population in the world. Over the next 5 years, we will be adding another 122 million people to that statistic. And there's roughly over a 4.3 trillion rand wealth transfer that's going to take place generationally. I want to repeat this figure, 4.3 trillion. And a lot of these business owners don't have succession.
Is this just in South Africa or just in South Africa?
Just in South Africa.
Okay.
4.3 trillion in South Africa. And so, we're sort of narrowing the conversation down to South Africa. I mean, there's trillions of US dollars globally that will go through the wealth transfer. But if we just took South Africa in context, there's the significant amount of wealth transfer. The question remains, 98% of businesses in South Africa are SMEs. The SME environment employs more than 60% of South Africans. And if there isn't a succession plan for these small businesses, what would happen to our current unemployment rate? And so the first problem that we are trying to solve is this massive unemployment that we have in South Africa. The second challenge that we have is that a lot of our business owners and entrepreneurs who put in a good 3 to 4 decades of entrepreneurship cash up and they take their money elsewhere. Isn't healthy for our economy, isn't healthy for our country. And the third challenge that we have is a lot of these business owners don't have a succession. Incidentally, more than 54% of family-owned businesses don't want their second generation to take over their company, their children or grandchildren. And so you've got this massive void in terms of succession planning. And what Tish talks about, the opportunity of ETAs and the search funding opportunity for young entrepreneurs as a third way into the economy, we've come up with a solution that is a segue between these young entrepreneurs and a number of retiring business owners who don't have a solution in terms of succession planning for them. And so the problem that we are trying to solve, bring BEE into it as well. A lot of young black entrepreneurs that want to have black-owned businesses. Here's a perfect solution for them that brings credibility, it brings credence, it brings a great degree of integrity to the transaction between a retiring business owner and a young entrepreneur. And it's about connecting these two parties, ultimately solving the problem for employment in the country, firstly, so that unemployment isn't exacerbated, but as a second opportunity to take established businesses and make them scalable. Now, here's an interesting stat for you. There's a 45% greater chance of an existing business that generates revenues, positive cash flows, for a young entrepreneur to succeed in a business like that compared to them starting up their own business. And there's a 90% failure rate of entrepreneurs starting up their own companies. So the odds certainly stack in favor of existing businesses transitioning to a younger generation of entrepreneurs. And that's the problem that we're trying to solve in South Africa. In order for South Africa to succeed, small businesses need to succeed. In order for small businesses to succeed long term, they've got to have succession planning. And this is an amazing opportunity to connect the new breed of entrepreneurs, if you will, right, to the older generation and have this wealth transfer, not just of money, but very importantly, skills, experience, and intellectual property. And we don't have the brain drain in South Africa anymore using this, because that brain trust gets moved over to a younger generation of entrepreneurs.
So I'm getting the sense that we're talking continuity here. We're talking about scaling. So the value of the existing small businesses is going to be enhanced and amplified through the scaling process that you're going to tell us a little bit about, because I think it's important for my listeners to understand the practicalities in the ETA funding model that makes business sense. Because, Tish, we've had generations of concepts, good ideas. More specifically here in South Africa, many people will tell you about the development plan that's gaining dust in some cabinet somewhere that hasn't been implemented. Great ideas come up in South Africa, but there's real poverty in implementation. So, Tony, I do want to hear about how exactly the ETA works, and glad to hear that it's really part of the ASI Group's DNA. It's what you guys have been doing all the time. So I want to hear how that works. But I want Tish to talk a little bit more about why this is the third way. Mm-hmm. What is the first and what is the second? And why is this opportunity to be understood as the much needed third way?
Definitely. I like the scene that you painted there of, over the years, there's been a lot of concepts, there's been a lot of ideas, but in terms of implementing those ideas and seeing real results, there hasn't been much in that way. So I think the beauty about ETA and search funding is that it's not just a singular concept or idea, it's more of a universal movement. So not one business can own it as a product or service. It's more just a new way of thinking and a new way of doing business. So coming back to the two ways, I mean, with all this talk about concepts and solutions and ideas and innovation, they've all still been bottlenecked into those two pathways. It's either you get a job and join the workforce, or you start a business from scratch. And we've heard the stats from Anthony of how difficult it can be to start a business from scratch and scale it. But then there's also difficulty in finding a job. There's not many jobs available, and career growth progression is also, dwindling. So if I had to put myself in the shoes of a graduate or even somebody that's been in the workforce for 5 years, I mean, I have these two pathways in front of me. None of them are seeming very attractive at the moment. On the one side, you have safety and security. On the other side, you have, all your hopes and dreams can come true in starting a business, but both have high levels of risk and, differing levels of reward as well. So the third way forward is really ETA and search funding, which combines the two. Essentially, you would be qualified as somebody who could potentially operationally and financially run a business, but you don't have access to funding, you don't have access to advice and mentorship of people like Anthony Govender, who has done this many times and over a period of about 20 years. And ETA sort of combines the two, whereby it's seen as a new career path, where you could actively go about trying to set up a search fund for yourself and become a searcher. So that's really the process of identifying a business that you would like to get involved in. It could be a specific business in a specific industry, or it could be a business across any industry that's a certain size. And obviously it would need to be suited to your skills and expertise as a business professional. So that's the first step, finding a business that you'd like to acquire. The next step is identifying an investor that could provide the capital to you as a searcher to actually acquire that business from a founder that is now retiring. And then the third part of that would be to, put the deal together. It would be good if there was some advisory and some mentorship involved. It would make the model, it would give it a higher probability of working for all three parties. And obviously ASI can provide access to capital, but also advice and mentorship as well. And when you put all those three things together, it becomes the perfect recipe for a young person in South Africa to have a new pathway ahead of them. You don't have to just go out there and look for a job in a market that's strained. You don't have to take the long road and climb up the big mountain of starting your own business. You have a third route forward that is much more beneficial for you and much more efficient in terms of resources and time and energy.
Anthony, let's get real here. And I want to paint you a scenario, and then you help me understand how practically we apply the ETA model onto that scenario. I'm a 50-plus white business person who spent 30 years slogging it out and making my SME successful. And my mind goes back to the 90s, the early 90s, when BEE, which is a big component of the South African entrepreneurship conversation, where if I want to be active and relevant in the business space, I have to give a certain portion of my business to a young business person, particularly of color, black business person, and a certain amount of my equity must go to that person. And some tried it, some failed. It has had limited success, that whole process. And in many ways, that's what's amplified a certain narrative in the country that we're dealing with at the moment. That's not what I want to talk about. But as a white baby boomer who really wants to contribute to South Africa's economic growth, so that's one scenario. The other scenario is that there's a young black guy or girl out there who wants to get into business, doesn't know what they don't know. Don't know what you don't know, right? But I want to go into business. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want the dignity that entrepreneurship gives me, in the sense that I am in charge of my own destiny. But I know the stats that you've talked about how much there's a 90% failure. I don't have adequate education in terms of entrepreneurship. But more importantly, I don't have capital. I don't have advisory services. How exactly do I deal with the fears that will come from both sides, and maybe from a funder? Here's a problem. There's money, but we don't have a real process as to how we solve the problem that gives dignity, security, and integrity to the whole system. Talk to me about those practicalities.
So thank you for this, Aubrey. I think this is the practical solution that we've come up with to a very practical problem, as you painted out earlier. You've got a baby boomer founder. He's run his business for the last 27 years, and I may actually be describing one of our partners here. Right. So he's 54 years of age. Started his business, had the wrong partners, burnt his fingers, and then decided to build his business single-handedly over the longest time. And he's the major shareholder of the company. Let's call him a 90% shareholder. And he's running his business this way for the last 27 years. There's no need for him to change anything. He's just recognize that there's one major challenge, and that is the business is very dependent on him. He is closer to 60 than he is to 40. And he recognizes that time is not on his side in terms of finding succession. He also possesses a very unique set of skills. And to train these skills into a youngster will take him at least the next 5 to 10 years. So he's got to make a critical decision. And that is, who is the person he's going to be handing this business over to over the next 5 to 10 years? Who's going to be the person that he gets to train? But very importantly, do they have their check? Because the last 27 years in building the company has taken a substantial amount of time, money, and most importantly, energy. Because, in the investment world, you track a return on investment, a return of capital, the net rate of return, but you very seldomly track the energy that's gone into building the company. And I want to just put a disclaimer that I'm yet to meet an entrepreneur that does not love South Africa and is not committed to some form of legacy planning and succession. They absolutely want to do it. So there's a willingness to want to do it. The question is, who do they do it with? And so the solution that Tishalan and the team have put together and have worked on over the last few years is pairing the founder entrepreneur with the right kind of successor. In essence, you spoke about B and giving away equity. He doesn't need to give away the equity. The equity is purchased. There's money in the bank. There's a cash-based transaction in lieu of equity.
There's money in the bank.
There's money in the bank. The seller of the business, the founder and seller of the business that requires succession, gets paid for his equity. Let's assume that this business is worth 20 million rand. And to sell 51% of the equity, his purchase expectation is 10.5 million rand. As the funder, ASI, pays him that 10.5 million rand. He now realizes value for his 27 years worth of work. It's not a giveaway. There's not handing over the equity with the hope that I may be paid. He is paid for his equity. The searcher comes on board as a second significant partner, equity partner, because the idea behind this is that having a young entrepreneur come into this business with very limited skills and experience is incredibly risky for the founder, firstly, but second, more importantly, for the search funder and the young entrepreneur coming on board, because he needs to gain experience and skills, which only happens with time. He needs to build up cash flow and capital, which only happens with time. And so the three typical challenges that every founder faces is this challenge of capital or cash flow, skills, and time. In order for him to find the succession, he's got to resolve that conundrum. ASI, being the funder, helps the young entrepreneur. We firstly identify the right DNA, the right culture, and importantly, the DNA match is always matched to the founder and the seller of the business. Because you might be a great fit for me as a seller. You may not necessarily be a great fit for Tishalan. And so it's really about pairing the DNA, value system, ethics, integrity is, we're uncompromising in that area. It's a non-negotiable. It's a non-negotiable. That's the standard. In fact, it is your entrance ticket to the game. If you can't build trust through integrity and your conduct, then we're not going to consider you. So that's the starting point. Your entrance ticket to the game of playing in entrepreneurship is that you have to be a highly integrous individual, because trust is the currency that we would sell to the founder, and trust is the currency we would trade by with the searcher of that business, and trust is ultimately is what's going to make the transaction successful. So now there's money that's exchanged hands. What is the benefit for the searcher coming in? Firstly, he gets access to capital that is cheaper than the bank, and it almost sounds too good to be true. So I want to put a disclaimer. You're getting access to capital that is cheaper than the bank because we are firstly coming on as an equity partner with you. We are your mentor, your coach, your advisor, and we hold your hand through the process. For the first 2 to 3 years, you will need a lot of guidance from us. And what you typically find, Aubrey, is that an entrepreneur is great in the marketing, the sale, and getting out there and bringing in the deal, but he's not necessarily as good in terms of managing the finances and managing cash flow and making the right decisions when it comes to technology and infrastructure and making the right strategic hires at the right time. And eventually they run into burnout. So it's about guiding them through that process. And over a period of time, getting him to repay this very favorable loan that's given to him back to the funder, where he owns a significant amount of equity. Let's call it, in this scenario, 49% of the equity that he is holding. Now he comes and he doesn't have any money. He doesn't have the skills. He doesn't have necessarily the experience. He needs money. He wants to buy a business. And we know that there's a 400% greater chance of him succeeding in this model than him starting his own business. We would be very happy to take that bet.
And we keep the business as a tax generating and contributing entity, and we keep the business for many other reasons, that it's been employing people and so forth.
100% right.
I want to stop because we got to take a quick break.
Sure.
But I do want to stay with the practicalities, because the whole problem in South Africa, and I suppose in the whole continent, is that we need to take good ideas and change them into practical realities. And I think that that's where the value is going to be unlocked. So let's stay tuned, folks. And as we continue with the conversation, I'm hoping that we'll get those that are watching the conversation and listening to give us their responses and ideas as we have this conversation. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back soon. Welcome once again to the second part of this first episode of the ASI Biz-Exchange. It's a brand new podcast, and I'm going to let Anthony talk a little bit about why we're calling it the ASI Biz-Exchange specifically, because I think that South Africa is in a unique position where we can really have an exchange of ideas that are going to help us pivot to the next evolutionary process of our country's economy. I think we've been for the last 30 years, been in the wilderness, as it were. And for the first time, I think that with this conversation about ETA and that funding model, we are beginning to see the promised land. And I'm really, really hoping that as we have this conversation and you're listening to all of this, you begin to understand that there is a practical concept. There have been many, many ideas in the South African conversation space. But for the first time, I'm getting the sense that we've got something that we can really put into practice that's going to bring us proper results, that's going to make everybody feel like they are considered and it's fair for everybody. And that way we'll be able to move forward. My guests, Tishalan Pillay, he's Group Director for Sales, Marketing and Distribution at the ASI Group. And then, of course, Anthony Govender, who is the founder and the CEO of the ASI Group. Tish, I want to come back to you, but I'm almost holding my fingers here so that I don't lose Anthony with regards to the practicality of this whole thing. As you can hear, I'm really, really stuck on how do we make things practical? Mm-hmm. How do we make things give us deliverables, right? Because as we've already agreed, that we're a great country as far as great concepts are concerned. Mm-hmm. Our problem comes into view when we can't implement. Yes. And what that does is that it creates all sorts of unnecessary trust issues. Everybody goes into their lagers. People feel hurt. And what would have been a beautiful, igniting value. In other words, the good feelings, what used to be called, Tony, you'll have the words, but what used to be called good value. What was the term that used to be used back in the day where we would talk about goodwill? Yeah, there's a lot of goodwill, right?
Yeah.
And then we lose the goodwill because of the unnecessary mistrust that takes place because of bad implementation of good ideas. This sounds like a good idea. ETA funding sounds like a good idea. Where has it worked?
So it's worked abroad in markets like the USA, UK and Europe, particularly in Spain. It's quite a weird sort of model that it diverts from how new ideas and innovations have previously been taken up. I mean, they do originate from the major markets in the world like USA and UK, but you normally see them spread across the globe fast in other areas like in Asia, China, India. Those are also major markets in the world. The Australia, New Zealand region, South America, etc. Africa always seems to be the last place that good ideas land. And, everyone talks about it, as you rightly say, what a great idea, what an innovation. But when it comes to practically implementing it, that's where we lack.
Why has it worked in Spain and all of the other countries? What are the attributes of the concept that have made it work in those other countries?
I think first of all, it's the level of skills, technical skills, and also levels of education that most people are put through in those major markets. The markets are high-performing markets, so there's a lot of business activity happening in those places, coupled with a lot of young people who go to university and graduate with very fancy degrees, very exclusive MBA programs, etc. And they go into the workforce or into the economy as entrepreneurs with a lot of knowledge up here that they've gained through their education. But even in those first world countries, there is still a lack of opportunity, not in the same way that there is in Africa, but mostly because of the saturation of those markets. A lot of businesses operate in a lot of industries, a lot of competition, and very little room for growth because of the size and the crowdedness of the market. So I think that's one factor. And then the other factor is, of course, the aging population. The bulk of the population is between 45 to 60 years old. And, these guys are retiring now. They're getting to the end of their lives. They've built quite a successful business in their own right. And, they have this legacy that they want to pass on. So it's taken off in those countries, which you could expect. And I think, if we look at how it's spreading across the rest of the world, it's very much in its infancy right now. But I think this concept particularly could be maybe the first time that Africa and South Africa jump on the board and get on the scoreboard ahead of those other nations because of how well it applies in our story.
Sure. One of the terms or one of the sayings that were attributed to former President Thabo Mbeki was that we are a country of two economies. And one of the things that I'm hearing that the ETA funding model is saying to me is that this is an opportunity to align those two economies and make one economy. It's what I'm hearing. And touch wood, it happens. But Anthony, I come back to you as the guy who's been in business for a considerable amount of time. Your business has, within its own DNA, the idea of looking for acquisitions, the empowering of young business people, the finding of founders and businesses that have, small businesses and maybe medium-sized businesses that have been quite successful. So the ingredients are all here, right? And for me, I want to go back and have you talk not just about the founder, because I find that a lot of South African founders who, as you say, love this country for obvious reasons, this country has been good to them, want to spread the sunshine. But the realities of business is that there's got to be trust. There's got to be money. And there's got to be a certain level of a guarantee for success. And the goodwill that might have existed perhaps in 1994 has waned significantly, in my opinion. We have at the moment the conversation about the Equity Act, where government is going to have even more power to tell businesses how to be run. And from a transformative background, you understand why. But the practicalities are the problem. And my fear is that we're going to have even more of the bloodletting, of the goodwill, the very little bit of goodwill that still exists. I want you to talk to the founder. What is in this model that should make them rest easy and perhaps pour more goodwill into their own reserves so that they can help us build this country? What do you say to that founder?
Yeah, I think, Aubrey, you made a very astute point that founders and entrepreneurs love South Africa. If you don't love South Africa, you won't make money here.
Precise.
You got to love your country. You got to love doing business here, and that's how you make money. And I think the same could be said for me and the many partners that we have in ASI. We love brand South Africa. We love our country. We love our home, and we choose to do business here. We can do business in many other countries, but we choose to do business here, and we remain emotionally invested and emotionally contracted to brand South Africa. So what does this mean for the founder? Any founder that we talk to loves the country. They're committed to legacy planning. The question is, if there is will, leadership will, and this commitment to do it, why don't they do it? The only reason why they won't do it is because they haven't found someone that's trustworthy enough. And so, often I frame that we're in the business of selling trust. Tish mentioned in our earlier informal conversation that being in the insurance industry, you sell a promise. Being in the property management industry as a fiduciary services business, you sell trust. You sell a promise that money that you keep with us would be safeguarded and invested responsibly and prudently, and there would be a return generated. And ultimately, what we are selling to our customers is psychological safety. You want to know that by partnering with us, whether it's our customer, whether it's our partner, and in this particular scenario, the founder, he needs to feel psychologically safe. And you only feel psychologically safe when you trust the person that you're doing business with. Now, how do you go from running your own business for the last 27 years and then having a youngster who's fresh out of university, only maybe 5 years of work experience, come to you and go, I want to buy your business. And by the way, I don't have the money. I don't have the skills. I don't have the experience. Neither do I have the business and financial acumen to structure this deal. He's not going to trust that person. And that's where we come in. We have a highly trusted brand in the country. We've built a lot of brand equity over the 17 years of us trading. And if you look at some of our partner businesses in our connectivity composite, they've been around for the last 4 decades. So we've built a lot of trust capital within the business community. When a founder approaches us, they understand that when we make this promise of purchasing the business, I use the example, if the business was valued at 20 million, and if we say we're going to cut out a check for 10.5 million rand for just over 50% of the equity, the founder trusts that this promise will be delivered. Right? And that's because you're dealing with a business that's got, and I say this with humility, substantial capital, cash flow, and has been trading for the longest time, and they can relate to you because from one founder to the next, we speak the same language. And the only thing that I need to then convince him on is that the youngster that I'm going to be putting in front of him, the searcher to buy the business, is the right DNA. And we would then hold his hand and develop the skills and experience that's needed to make him a success in the business. And so the typical challenge in getting the founder to believe that this transaction will work is firstly capital. And what do you know? If you speak to most African entrepreneurs, they tell you that it's access to capital, access to funding. And there isn't a shortage of funding in the country. But the fact that in this particular model, that the funder, who's both financially and emotionally invested in the search or the young entrepreneur who's going to guide him, the only time that we get to make money and realize our capital return is if he's a success. If he fails, we fail. We're like Siamese twins joined at the hip. And so the founder again gets great confidence because aside from him getting the capital, getting his check for his 27 years worth of hard work, he also gets trust in the system. And very importantly, he has a partner that is emotionally invested in him, in the young entrepreneur, to develop this entrepreneur. The other benefit for the founder is that, I said that entrepreneurs would only do well in the country if they love brand South Africa. So now you have a very successful medium enterprise who's making really, really good margins, but he is nearing retirement. If we gave him the opportunity and the platform to pass his skill and experience into a youngster, why wouldn't he do that, especially if he's being paid handsomely for his business? And that's what we have got right with this solution. I think what we've put together as an ASI team, and Tishalan's leading this strategy for us, is we've created a model, a business model that protects. There's 3 wins in the process. There's the win for the founder, there's the win for the searcher, and there's a win for the funder, being ASI, or any other fund that the searcher and fund.
Can I add a fourth?
Yeah. There's a big win for the employees and customers in the country.
There's a big win for the country. I mean, guys,
Which may be the biggest one.
which is the biggest win. You know, one of the tragedies of the South African story, regardless of which side of the story you come from, is that we have something of such great potential that if we don't come up with elegant solutions like what we're talking about right now, it will fall into the abyss of history. It will. All the signs are there. We're watching it happen, and I sometimes get the sense that we're watching an accident happening and we can't stop it. Right? And for the first time, I'm having a conversation that is not about a better definition of the problem, but rather a real practical solution that is going to not only be a win for the entrepreneur, the searcher, the funder, but for the country. Because I think that there's a lot of goodwill, and I've said it before, that a lot of goodwill that we had in the tank that has been depleted by bad implementation, by a lot of different things that we could talk about. We're going to talk about the searcher in a few moments' time, but I think it cannot be underscored and emphasized enough how much the country, as an economy, as a social entity, as a historical entity, and as a player in the future, not only in South Africa but on the continent and therefore the globe, how much goodwill there is if this succeeds.
Spot on. In fact, sorry,
yep.
Aubrey, the primary reason we're doing this, and I'm often asked the question, so, 17 years of trading, you guys have clearly done well. We're a cash-rich business. We're one of those handful of homegrown South African corporates that have been self-funded, that has a debt-free and risk-free balance sheet. And we want to keep it that way. Why would you want to do something? Why would you take the capital that you've built up over so many years? Surely you can buy a private jet or buy a yacht, but for some of us entrepreneurs, social impact is far bigger and far more important for us than simply having the private jet and the Ferrari. It's something that I wrestle with still today. Every time I pass the Ferrari dealership, I go, I really wanted this. I know I can afford it, but it's not a 7 million rand decision. It's a 14 million rand decision, because if I invested this money and I got a 15% return over the next 5 years, it's not 7 million, it's 14 million. And so I often find myself turning away because a good financial advisor would not make bad financial decisions. And I'm not suggesting to entrepreneurs that they shouldn't enjoy their money and enjoy the spoils of entrepreneurship, but I'm suggesting that we can use the money more responsibly. And so what's been driving my partners in business is that, and you'd recall, Aubrey, I had that horrible ordeal where I was lying in a hospital bed in COVID.
Yeah.
And you very quickly realize that you can't take your sports cars and the nice houses and the yacht with you. You leave it all behind. And so the question is, what do you do with the money that's left behind? Now, we have got two choices. Do nothing, let the money grow. As most large corporates, and especially the international-owned businesses in South Africa, over the last 5 years, they've been sitting on a war chest of cash. They don't want to spend the money purely because of where we are politically in our country, or due to the trade war tensions that have more recently surfaced. Local businesses, however, who love brand South Africa and are committed to investing, have said, like we did a year and a half ago, we committed 100 million. Incidentally, we would have, by the end of the next quarter, we would have outperformed that 100 million rand commitment. We're now saying we're going to pledge another 300 million into small businesses and help them grow and thrive in the economy. If we held on to the money, we're certainly not going to take it to our graves. And incidentally, every founder that I've spoken to, this resonates with them, because the thing that drives them as business owners is creating value and creating impact, and very importantly, creating legacy. And I really believe what we've done with the ETA fund is create a vehicle for sustainable legacy in entrepreneurship in South Africa.
Well, one of the things that we said is that there needs to be a dialogue in South Africa, and by saying so, I mean that, because somebody's going to say, Aubrey, we've had dialogues. I don't think we've had conversations in this country. I don't think we've had dialogues, real dialogues. I think we've been speaking at each other, not to each other, right?
And with each other, yeah.
And I think that that's probably part of the reason why we have the current strain. Sure, you can look and say, there's the guy called Donald J. Trump at the moment, and he's got some interesting ideas about tariffs and all sorts of things. But we here in South Africa have not been speaking to each other. We've recently begun talking at each other again, which is not very productive. And this podcast is about trying to reignite that conversation, where there's a real exchange of ideas through conversation. I want you to quickly touch on that a little bit, because I think there's podcasts everywhere at the moment, right?
It's the flavor of the day.
Yeah, but I think that we might be onto something here, in that there's a real exchange of value-pregnant ideas that must be delivered soon.
Well, you raised the question, how did we get to, and credit to Tishalan and my team who came up with this, the Biz-Exchange. We've been running the Biz Network, the ASI Biz Network, for many years now, and we said, well, there's this younger generation of entrepreneurs that get content. They pride themselves on receiving content, creating content. We got to communicate to them in a medium and language that they understand. So how do we impact them? And so this podcast was necessitated, not so that we can jump onto the bandwagon, but we wanted to communicate to our youngsters in a medium that they could relate to. So this is really about them. The principle behind the Biz-Exchange, this word exchange defined, if you search the dictionary meaning, means that you would be receiving something and giving something. So this is our gift to the entrepreneurial community. We are of service to the entrepreneurial community. We are of service to the leadership, the business leadership community. And we're saying, we're here and we are pledging ourselves to you as a proudly South African brand, because we want to impact business and we want to impact society. Yeah. What will we be receiving from you? For that business owner, and let's call him Brian for the purposes of this podcast. I have a business owner in the property management industry. Sadly, he suffered a really a bad heart attack, and he's only got 50% of his heart functioning at this point. He's been in the industry for the last 30-odd years, and he's probably 3 years away from 70 at this point. He doesn't have a succession plan. He's got 2 kids, one's abroad in Australia, the other's in the UK, if I recall correctly, and they have no interest in taking over the business. They don't want to do property management. They don't want to listen to people complain about their grass not being cut in their gardens and their geyser being burst. They've got other things planned for their lives. And Brian has the unfortunate reality of now finding a successor. Brian's skill and experience in the property management industry over the last 3 decades can't be lost. He understands things about sectional title law, about the Land Act, that our youngsters need to learn. We need to transfer his skills and experience to one of the young black property managers. And Stephen, who's the chairperson of the PPRA, the regulator of the property industry, and I had this conversation about how do we enable older white property managers who have been in the industry for the last 3 to 4 decades that want to leave a legacy plan and want to hand over their businesses, hand them over to young black practitioners. The ETA solves that problem very practically. It says to Brian, Let us help you into retirement. And if you could work maybe 2 to 3 hours a week whilst you are not as well as you used to be 20 years ago, do that. And when you're ready to hang up your gloves, you tell us. And for the youngster that's there, here's a great business that's been trading for the last 3 decades. It is cash flow positive. It has got customers. It has got employees, all the things that you would need to build as an entrepreneur to start up. The first thing you need to do is get a customer. Then you need to hire people. Well, it has all of that. And perhaps with renewed energy and vigor, because you're young and you are 31 years old and you've had 5 years of working in corporate and you understand how business functions, you could come in with renewed energy and double the size of this company. So it's a beautiful win for someone like Brian. And let's call it a young Tishalan who comes in as a young entrepreneur that says, I want to be involved in that business.
Yeah.
That's exactly what South Africa needs.
One of the things you spoke about, Tishalan, was values. I'm revisiting all of this stuff. In conversations that Tony and I have had before, we spoke about the fact that part of the success of any business is how you communicate the values to somebody else that you embody as an organization, as a person. Is what do you think the ETA as just fundamental values embodies? Because somebody's listening to us talk at the moment and says, okay, it's a good idea, but what are the values that are embedded in this idea? You spoke about integrity, you spoke about transparency. Talk to me about those values.
Definitely. I think, the ETA model is leveraged off relationships, and relationships are the essence of any business. I mean, if you look at ASI, we've got a financial services business, property business, a connectivity business, but all of those businesses have customers that we need to serve. And especially in, Ant's already spoken about the property business, but if you look at financial services, structuring employee benefits solutions for our 7,300 corporate clients out there, our 2.4 million individual customers. The most important thing that we need to focus on is the values, and those are trust, integrity, and credibility, especially in terms of insurance and investments as well. You're handing over your money to a company that either needs to protect that money or make it grow for you. So it's a very serious thing. And we are very cognizant of that, we're dealing with real people. It's not always, assets like buildings or cars or liabilities. It's also living, breathing human beings with futures ahead of them and families at home. And we are the custodians, of those people, and we need to take care of them. So integrity, credibility, and trust is paramount. And I think when you look at ETA and search funding, it becomes even more important because there's 3 parties involved. There's the searcher, there's the successor, and then there's also the investor. So I would say to anyone listening out there that if you have the right DNA, if you have the right attitude, if you have the right vision for yourself, your community, the family that you come from, and then on a bigger picture for the country and for the continent, then ETA search funding is a perfect model for a young, talented, intelligent entrepreneur that exhibits those values.
I want to ask about the various, perhaps specific industries or sectors that, from an ASI Group point of view, you'll be focusing on.
In terms of the
ETA, yeah.
Well, we have our 3 composite verticals, as I've mentioned, financial.
So you'll continue that
connectivity. I mean, those are quite large industries. Financial services spans, insurance products for individuals, investment solutions for individuals, as well as corporate solutions in terms of employee benefits. There's a big focus on not just the traditional products, but also the overall wellness of companies and their staff and individuals, both from a physical point of view and from a financial point of view. So financial services is quite broad. And then when you go into property, there's the management of the property and all the different segments in terms of law, financial management, and also people management for the people living in those homes. And then we've got connectivity, which spans IT, managed services, cabling infrastructure within businesses and buildings, etc. So it's quite broad industries, and it's industries that are sort of at the core of the economy. Obviously, there's mining, oil and gas, manufacturing, banking as well. It's not to say that we wouldn't ever look at those industries, but we have the most value to offer in our three composite verticals. But of course, business is business, and Anthony and the team, we've got a large selection or plethora of business executives within ASI, from the core business, the board and the other leaders in the business, but also from all the acquisitions that we've successfully undertaken. There's just a wealth of knowledge and experience there, which is able to offer entrepreneurial flexibility to the searchers out there who are looking for something real to dedicate their lives to for the next decade or two.
So you were still explaining to me about how you have taken the values that Tish has been speaking about,
Yeah.
and actually made them a business value proposal.
Spot on. And so, the part of these values of trust and integrity, we look for this in the partners, but more so, one of the critical things that we look for in young entrepreneurs and partner businesses is their commitment and will to have social impact, community impact. Because we're a business that solves problems. If you look at the financial services business, we are solving a financial literacy and a wealth literacy problem in South Africa. We've got, you pointed this massive Gini coefficient, almost having these two clusters of businesses. Township business communities need the same level of financial literacy and wealth literacy as corporates do. And so we are emotionally invested and contracted to that in South Africa, and an enormous amount of success that we are driving in that space. And Tishalan mentioned the over 2 million lives impacted. We are hoping that can continue to grow. In the property management industry, the fastest growing property brand in the country, incidentally, 100% of our capital investment has already been returned, and that business is flying. And one of the primary reasons it's doing so well is because the communities we serve trust us. They feel psychologically safe, and they know that even when there's a problem, when there's an administrative issue, they're dealing with an accountable party that will solve the problem. If they're 10 Rand short of in the bank account, we'll solve that problem for them and take accountability, because the value of our brand equity is a lot larger than their business. And so there's implicit trust. But in both of those businesses, there's a very, very strong drive on this value of humanity. What do we want? What is the problem that we're trying to solve in property management? We want communities to live in dignity, with dignity, and respect to each other. It's, we speak of Ubuntu in South Africa, but it's actually ensuring that it takes place in our communities. If you want a community to have a state of well-being, deal with the dignity of how that community scheme is run. And that's exactly what we're doing. The number of property managers that have been around and that have siphoned funds and really betrayed these communities, I feel for them. But we have a responsibility now to solve that. And so a lot of the unethical managers are being taken out of the equation. Some of them are actively being looked in by the regulator. We want to build trust in communities, and we are solving a problem. If you look at the connectivity space, in order for us to be relevant in Africa, often, Vusi Temekwa mentioned that, Europe and America has always led Africa. If you look at our equipment, if you look at our technology, if you look at our digital platforms, I'm yet to see an African digital platform that we actively use. The promise there was, how do we keep business sustainable by keeping them connected? And so this call to action of keeping businesses connected to their purpose of their brands and their products and their services is what we honed in on. So in every one of the businesses, we're solving problems, always with this golden thread of humanity, trust, and delivering social impact.
And the young person that you are going to search for as the searcher who must be connected to the founder of the business is you 30 years ago. It's me 30 years ago.
Spot on.
And there are some specific challenges that you'll recall that our generation of youngsters had. And there's perhaps different other challenges for the 30-year-old now, right? You'll remember that we had to learn how to speak corporatese. We had to learn how to find the right accent because, you got to speak a particular way.
Absolutely.
We had to learn how to understand how to overcome our own proclivities, our own fears, our own inadequacies, and then fit into a corporate space. You went a little bit further and understood how to become an entrepreneur and a business leader in a context where we were coming from a very painful past. And in many instances, we found that we had imbibed a narrative that says, this system owes us because of the oppression, the repression, the lack of opportunities we were subjected to in our past. Many of the people that are going to be the partners who come from the exact opposite reality are going to have to be managed and allowed to meet. It appears to me that that's going to be the big challenge for ASI as it tries to marry people from those two realities.
So this has been probably one of my single biggest challenges over the last 7 years. I have partners that are white Jewish. I have partners that are white Afrikaans. I have partners I have black partners. I've got brown partners. As my son Alex would put it, I've got peach partners. They don't see the black and white as we do. And so the reality, they all come from different cultural backgrounds. They all have different sort of tribal views and ethnic views of how business should be done. But we're a non-tribal brand. What we do place a huge amount of value on is our value system. And what's interesting is whether you read the Torah, whether you read the Bible, or you read the Bhagavad Gita or the Quran, the values, the fruits of the Spirit, is very, very consistent. We're a business that embraces spirituality. I'm incredibly grateful to God for all the opportunities that I have as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. But equally so, I know what my responsibility is as a faith-based Christian of how I want to impact society and how I want to impact my fellow brethren and sisters in the country. And so what we've been able to do very, very, I think uniquely as ASI, is build a culture, not just on paper where we say we have the spirit of Ubuntu, but true South African Ubuntu, where I have white partners that are so emotionally invested in developing township kids. I've never seen this in any other business. If you look at our insure business, our managing director there is Rian van Wyk, really phenomenal human being. His sheer commitment to developing young black South Africans, because he appreciates the context of transformation. And if you look at our business, we're a level 1 BE company, we're a South African-owned business. 76% of our employees are PDIs, or what you would define black in terms of the charter. But we also equally employ almost 3 times the national average of white South Africans. So BE is also supporting white South Africans. The numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
And they see we're creating equal opportunity for all.
See, because that was going to be my next question.
This is not about racializing, going, This is only for black entrepreneurs.
Right.
In fact, I want to boldly state that when we pick a searcher and when we pick a founder, the founder may necessarily be a black founder and the searcher might be a white South African.
Wow.
We are not going to prejudice a white South African because we're a non-tribal brand. We're a proudly South African brand. So I'll give you a great example. I've got this youngster in our business doing really, really amazing things. His name is Chris. I've got a second youngster by the name of Jason. I've got this amazing lady in HR who's Cisco. It just so happened that they happen to be the second generation from some of our founders. They're employed in different areas of our business. We're a group of family companies that have come together. A third of all SMEs in the country are family-owned businesses. And so we've got this very, very strong South African family culture, but with a golden thread that goes across that says, you are not going to be picked because you are black. Now, you said something interesting earlier. You said, we come from this past where we felt, well, this is what we were owed. I felt like that as a youngster. And very quickly, working for this big financial services company in Sandton, I was taught that I was owed nothing, but I owed everything to the company. And one of the things that we are doing with these youngsters is shaping them, including the second generation that may be linked to some of the founders. You're not entitled. You get there on merit. The fact that you got there on merit and the fact that you might be peach and you have green eyes, fantastic, you become the future CEO because you are most deserving of the role. If you are in a dark chocolate and you are South African and you speak Zulu, fantastic. If that's how you got there based on merit and skill and hard work, you're deserving of the position. So we're not going to prejudice a young white South African that comes to me, and if he's a farmer's kid and he says to me, I'm from the Free State, I support the Cheetahs. I mean, everybody makes bad decisions. I have to say this is a Shark supporter, but I would say that
everybody makes bad mistakes as
bad choices. Yeah.
As a Northern Transvaal supporter, I forgive you.
So I would look at it and go, as a proud Shark supporter, we are unified by the Springbok jersey.
Right.
The number of young kids that I see run out in the field and hug Sia without any discrimination of color. They don't see the colors we do. We have a duty to serve them.
I want to ask you this question, and maybe we'll save some of the other stuff for the next episode because the juice is starting to flow here. But what is it that you, as the leader of the ASI Group, that has the daunting and maybe in a certain way enviable responsibility of making ETA work in the unique context of South Africa's history, present and future? What do you think that you are going to have to unlearn that comes from your past as a black kid from the townships in KwaZulu-Natal that's going to make you find the right searches in order for us to be able to claim our rightful place in the economies of the world that ETA promises?
It's a very powerful and deep question because it's been probably the single biggest.
It's a question I'm asking myself now, even as we speak. Yeah,
it's been my single biggest personal growth curve and path over the last sort of 5 to 6 years. It's firstly unlearning learned experiences and wisdom that you had gained as a child. And firstly, forgiving yourself and forgiving the communities in the world from this experience. Because as a young kid, you're subjected to a lot of things that you don't get to choose. So it's firstly unlearning some of that and forgiving yourself and forgiving the people around you that may have wronged you. But equally so is just taking a renewed perspective, of what can I do? And I measure my life by this one word, which is progress. Can I be a better human today than I was yesterday? can I be a bit better business leader today? Because we all make mistakes. I mean, as human beings, we
I
fallible,
mean,
right?
you support the Sharks.
There we go. There we go. We all make bad choices. And so, I look at this and I go, what can I do today as a business leader, as a founder with an ASI, to be better than I was yesterday? My single biggest giveaway from this podcast series must be, how do I serve other entrepreneurs? I have a duty and responsibility to help the many young Anthonys and Aubreys and Tishalans out there. If I retired with my skill and experience and did not share it with the world, I would offer no value. I bumped into a partner of mine last week at the Grill House. I hosted a number of clients over lunch, and one of my competitors was there, and really, really lovely guys. And I suggested to them that I would like to sit down with them and help them increase the value of their business and tell them how they could grow it and run it more sustainably. And they were completely mind-boggled by this. And so one of them said, but why would you want to tell me things that you're doing in your business? And I said, well, why shouldn't I? The reality is, if I cease to exist tomorrow, God forbid that I have a short life, but if I died tomorrow, what would I have left behind? And imagine if you were the next successful ASI. There would be a great story to tell. And hopefully I would have inspired you to pay it forward. The challenge we have in South Africa, a number of business owners are quite selfish in their skill and experience, and that's because there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of psychological safety. And you would note that from a lot of my business media posts, I'm talking about building trust in Africa, restoring trust in South Africa. And the only way to do that is to serve. And so Tishalan and I are just here to serve the entrepreneurial community. And we will find, I say we will because it's a foregone conclusion, we will succeed. I'm absolutely, and we may have the odd failure, and that's okay, and we'll fail forward. But we will find those youngsters that suit the opportunities, and we will find those founders, and we will connect those two business communities. And if our former president, Mbeki, said there were two business communities, we intend making it one. That's our plan.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for a conversation about business that feels more like a conversation about humanity. Because I think that there's a lot of podcasts out there that are talking about business, but the more I listen to conscious business people, the more I listen to people that have a real human responsibility, the more I understand that business is a lot less about business than it is about business. It's about humanity. And I'm hoping that as we continue in the series of conversations that we're going to have, that we'll be able to bring that out a lot more for people to understand the serious responsibility that you have beyond making successes of businesses and finding people to match in the whole ETA ecosystem, but really to help people understand the responsibility of humanity. Tish, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Tony, I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
You're most welcome.
And I'm really looking forward to all of the other conversations we'll have. Thank you very much.